So, hi everyone, and welcome to the 1 in 15 discussions. My guest today is Rohini. Hey Rohini, and I'm going to ask her to just introduce herself and tell us a little bit about what she does.
Thanks, Andy. This is wonderful to be with you talking about a topic that is going to be really interesting. A bit about me: I actually work with people who want to really take ownership of their life's journey, and I help them to become more self-aware, grow their self-belief, and also exercise a bit more self-control in the way they show up in the world. So that's a bit about me.
Brilliant. That's really great. So you know, of course, that the purpose of these interviews is we're trying to find one issue that is affecting your profession and your exercising of that profession, and then we'll chew the fat a little bit about what that is. So tell me about one of the things that has been a particular impact in recent months on what you do.
So I think the biggest impact for me, obviously, like for everyone else on this planet, has been, what's happened with the COVID and lockdown and how that's made us all perhaps rethink the way we live and how we work. So for me particularly, and as a coach, my signature program is called Create Your Own Breakthrough. And as the name suggests, it's all about helping people to identify the one thing that may be holding them back, or perhaps the one thing they want to achieve, and then through a step-by-step getting them there. And I realized that actually that works in a world that's the way there's a certain amount of control and a certain amount of predictability. In a world that we're in now, all of those things have basically just been swept away, and we're in a place where actually nobody really knows what the new normal is going to look like. And how do you then plan for what you want, or how do you actually, look at things in that old framework, which we all as coaches have learned so well to work with it. So I think what my new thing is really about helping people to find their own flow, because I think when you are able to live in the flow state, you kind of really are in a zone of, really feeling like you're productive, you're fulfilled, and you're happy. So that's where I am now. That's the opportunity for me to slightly pivot from breakthroughs to possibilities and flow.
I love that. I mean, I think I've said to you before, one of the metaphors I use in my own coaching is of a river journey, and we talk sometimes about how some river journeys, like a canal, it's fairly constrained, constructed, slow and steady progress, and we have certain bits along the way, the locks in that metaphor, where we stop and we do particular pieces of work. And for some clients, and sometimes in my own life, that's exactly what I need. But at other times, it's more like being on that free-flowing river, and letting the course of the river take you in maybe directions you weren't wholly expecting. Sometimes it feels like you're not wholly in control of your trajectory even. And other times where we notice a tributary perhaps, and we might think, well, that's not the course we thought we were going to go on, but that seems really important that we explore. Sometimes it doesn't come to anything. Sometimes it's a new destination in itself. So that seems to resonate really with what you're saying. How are you finding people are making that transition from a more kind of structured way of trying to get things through to going with that flow?
Oh, it's incredibly hard for a lot of people. As you can imagine, we're sort of brought up to do things, and I think being in the flow really means you have to focus on being rather than doing.
Sure.
And I think for you and I, and we've come to a stage in our lives where it's probably more possible for us to just reflect and allow ourselves to be. But for people who've been very, very focused, and especially high performers, people who are very successful, their whole life has been built on doing stuff and doing stuff well. And for them to suddenly be told, well, you know what, just park that to-do list for a little while. Sure. And slow down and just discover, it's really hard. It's a real challenge. And I think that for me in my coaching business is the challenge. How do I get people to experience something that is not there for them at the moment? How do you get people to sort of sense a possibility when they're more used to sensing pain and finding solutions for it?
Yeah. No, and again, that really resonates with me. Again, it's been particularly with the pandemic and the lockdown. It's been really interesting to me how different people have reacted, and people who've had a lot of structure and a lot of control have felt in control of their life and their decisions. Often they've been the ones where, when I'm chatting to them, that it feels like the impact of COVID has has been felt more strongly because that control, or maybe that illusion of control, has been kind of stripped away. Whereas other people who've been more used to, kind of more aware of where they're not in control, or where they're not wholly in control, or of having to, to push a kind of boating metaphor a little bit, having to use the oars, to use the flow of the river to get them to where they want to go, recognizing that sometimes they can exert that control and actually get where they want to go, and sometimes they can't. Those people seem to be on some level dealing with it better, because it's just an extension. It's a major one, to be sure, but it's just an extension, isn't it? COVID, lockdown, pandemic, of the reality of life, is that sometimes we can predict, sometimes we can be in control, and sometimes we can't. Sometimes something blindsides us, or whacks that, breaks our rudder, or what have you, to stretch the metaphors.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, but what's interesting about COVID, that it's affected everyone.
Yeah.
Where in life, normally you have something, an event occurs, and suddenly your life has changed, and this carefully crafted picture that you were building up is suddenly thrown in the air. But this time it's everyone's. In a way, there's a shared experience that's really powerful. So you don't feel so alone.
Yeah.
But it doesn't help. It still makes you feel like, oh, I've still got to deal with this. I may not be alone, but it doesn't make it that much easier. So yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a crisis, but it's also an opportunity if you want to take it that way.
Yeah, and I think maybe it's a very common coaching tool, isn't it? That where we talk about what you can control, what you can't control, and then this kind of big grey area in the middle of things that you can do that might influence an outcome but aren't guaranteed. And I think maybe for the reality of things like COVID, external things like COVID, is that there's suddenly a whole load of stuff that we thought was in the we can influence this, or we thought that was in the we can control this category, that's suddenly absolutely definitively in the I can't do anything about this. Like not being able to travel into work, not being able to meet up with people, it has a massive impact on us personally and professionally, and we've had to respond to that. And some people have had the capacity and the resources to respond to that better. Some of that will be life experience stuff, and some of that will be other things, that other previous experiences that have helped them have some resilience, perhaps. But yes, that's really, really interesting. So, but it can be really freeing, can't it, to kind of, when we're able to psychologically get to that point where we go, I can't control this. It's either a prison of anxiety, or it's a freedom of going, well, if nothing I do will change that, I don't need to pour as much energy into worrying about that. I don't need to spend a lot of anxiety on that.
Exactly. And I think the beauty of, adopting that kind of mindset is that you realize that actually this prison you've created, you are your prisoner and your captor at the same time.
Yeah.
So, you've put yourself in that prison. Nobody else has put you in there, and you can set yourself free. And I think for me, what I want to do is, lead people through an experience of just themes of how to look at themselves differently, how to connect with themselves in a way that perhaps they've never had the time to.
Sure.
And I just finished a 30-day program which I call Find Your Flow, and the biggest realization for me was that 30 days was definitely too short.
Yeah.
Because the themes we explored were like pretty big themes, and so actually the biggest learning from it was that it probably needs to be more like 30 weeks or at least 6 months. But I think the feedback from that has been really, really powerful. Even if people have taken away just a couple of those themes,
sure,
it's changed how they've seen themselves, and I think that's what it's all about.
So tell me a little bit. I'm really interested by that idea that people connected with it over the 30 days, but 30 days didn't feel like enough. Why is it that it would need longer to be properly embedded, or for people to understand it?
Because for the reason we talked about, that we've got used to living our lives in a certain way, in a very structured way. To free yourself from that structure it's not and also you're trying to find your own flow. It's not like a structure is given to you, a blueprint that you're going to follow. So actually the 30 days were enough for me to send a load of themes to them, but it's not enough for them to internalize them, to have time to actually practice them and learn from them and create a cumulative benefit from it, because each theme interlinked to the previous one. So they're not, it's like the difference between simple interest and compound interest. you
Yeah.
know. So you have to take the first few themes and really before you can really add on the other ones.
Sure.
So but you know, and this is all part of finding my own flow. You know, I experimented with something. It was catchy to say, you know, find your flow in 30 days.
Yeah.
Because if I said find your flow in 6 months, not many people would have come. It doesn't trip off the tongue quite in the same way. So it was a great learning experience for me, but also the people who came along and, you know, were part of it. So yeah, and I'm sure as with the river, you know, it's gonna flow and it's gonna add on new things and, you know, change its trajectory over time. But that's so good.
I really like the idea of that course. And I was a passive observer over some of those 30 days and got a lot out of it when I did. And but it occurs to me that, you know, what you've actually done there is you found a halfway between structure and complete freedom, where you're giving people a kind of a looser structure, maybe in those 30 days, you know, that kind of, as you say, if they do task one or concept one and they progress through it, and it makes
Yeah.
sense that you've done the stuff previously. And maybe that's part of the genius of this kind of transition time that we're in. You know, sociologists will talk about a time of liminality, a time of, you know, between places, between stages. You know, adolescence for a lot of people is liminality. You're no longer a child, but you're not quite an adult. You know, COVID is this kind of, the old way of doing things has gone. The new way of things hasn't yet emerged properly. And we're all traveling together in this kind of, I don't really know what's going on. And it's hugely freeing for some people and hugely paralyzing for others, which is why we need to do it as a community, where the benefit of doing it in community is profound. But what you're doing actually is you're giving people some tools. You're helping them go, like, here are some of the structures that we've been used to. Some of them are not going to work going forwards. Some of them are going to have to be changed and adapted dramatically. Some of them are going to have to be reimagined. And we're going to have to find new structures or new ways of living without structure. And so that's really interesting kind of thing. I love that. I love that. So we're heading towards our time already. We've got a couple of minutes left. So
Yeah.
one of the things that's really important with this 1 in 15 idea is that I want people to go away with some sense of hope and momentum from these discussions. So with what we've talked about, where do you see that hope? Where do you see that possibility?
So I think what I would like people to take away from this is that actually, that first of all, they're not alone, that, you know, we're all experiencing it at different levels. And to discover what's possible for you, I think the key thing, and this is one of my, you know, themes from the 30 days, to stay curious. So what I'd like them to do is maybe, you know, if they've found one or two hooks in what we've talked about today, you know, just get curious and, you know,
Yeah,
search more on that and, you know, find out how it resonates with them and begin to find their own flow, because it's really fun when you get going, because, you know, really you experience things that you never thought you would, you didn't
yeah,
even know existed, but equally you discover what's truly possible for you, and that's where really the flow state starts to play.
that's great. That's really good. And if people have been kind of captured by this idea, where could they start? Where could they start looking for places or resources to find their flow?
Well, I think we're so blessed, you know, with the internet. You know, go on Google, and I think I'm keen to sort of allow people the freedom to come up with whatever's, you know, come up for them really,
Yeah,
before I tell them what to look for. I mean, we've had some really interesting nuggets of conversations about liminality and possibility and flow and rivers, and, you know, so really they have plenty of choice, but just stay curious. That's
sure.
the way to be. Yeah.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant, Raheem. It's been amazing. I mean, I think I'd be doing both of us a disservice if I didn't say, remember that coaches are great people to help you on this journey, because we're not going to be telling you where you should go, but we may say, we may be the people you need with you to give you permission to explore those tributaries, or to stop, or to change direction, or to recognize where you're not as in control. But there other resources are available. Rohini, it's been an amazing conversation, and I'm really energized by it. I'm really conscious of things I want to go off and think about. I'm really conscious that you know, like your find your flow in 30 days. This conversation is, you know, we've not even scratched the surface of the gems in this, and it'd be really, really interesting to explore with you or with others like where else we can go with this. But in terms of the 1 in 15, that is our time. So thank you, Rohini. You've been a star, and I'm sure we'll catch up with you at some point later.
Thank you, Andy. I really enjoyed it.
No worries. Thank you.